Seated. It's Zenobia back there. I'm sorry, I don't see. Stand up, sweetheart. Would you please? So glad you came today. The Lord bless you. Amen. They send in missions money to us every month, as well as so many of these other ministries here, because they know John had a heart for missions. Thank you, my Father. I wanted to tell you about some people that John really loved. He loved his sister, Jackie Smith. And Jackie's here. Beautiful lady down here in the white. Jackie, you want to stand up, sweetheart? Pretty red hair. And her son's with her and daughter-in-law. You want to stand up? She's the only one left now. There were 6 of them, and all of them have gone now. And when I called her, called her to tell her about her brother, she said, I didn't want to go. I didn't want to leave him, let him go, because I didn't want him to go because I thought he had too much to do for Jesus. Well, we felt that way too, but we just wanted him to go and not live in the condition that he was in. I hope you understand that. He would not have wanted to live in the condition he was in. He said, I want to preach, and I want to preach healthy. And he was not healthy, and he had not been healthy. But that didn't mean he didn't love God. And that didn't mean he didn't trust God. The night that he died at 2 o'clock in the morning on our den floor, actually his heart stopped then. He was brain dead. He was resuscitated and on a ventilator. But Gary, my son-in-law that leads the singing, where is Gary? We had some problems with him breathing and all, and I was so tired, and he was tired, and for weeks and weeks he had not been able to sleep. And so I had gone upstairs and gotten him some pillows, and I had done everything, Mayor Brown, that I could to make him comfortable. I rubbed his back, and he was counting the time that he could go to dialysis to get some of the fluid off of his lungs. He had to start on dialysis in October, which he didn't want to do. It was such a hard decision for him, but they thought he couldn't live without it. And you know, when you want to live, when you've got a job to do, Chief Bradford, you'll do anything you can. So we trusted the doctors and all, and it was hard on him because his heart has been weakened from years and years and years of hypertension. Finally, the dialysis helped get his blood pressure down, but then it made his heart weaker and weaker and weaker. So I was in bed. Every time I'd get covered up and think I could go to sleep, he'd say, darling, would you do this? Would you do that? And finally, he said, you're so tired. He said, I'm going to go in the den, and I'm going to lie down on the couch, and I'm just going to stay in there so you can rest. And he wasn't out of the bedroom that long until I just dropped off in a sound sleep because I really was tired. I didn't know it, but he called, come here, Gary. He called my son-in-law, Gary. This is April's husband, our youngest daughter's husband, leads the singing here, youth pastor. He had a lot of confidence. Are your mother and dad here? Dr. and Mrs. Simon, stand up, would you please? This is his mother and dad. He's a cardiovascular surgeon. Gary grew up in the operating room. He grew up around medicine, so John felt comfortable, and they lived just a few blocks from us. He said, Gary, would you come over and sit with me a little while? This was about 1 o'clock. He'd been to a men's meeting, or a meeting at the summit in Columbus, Texas, and he was still up. He said, Daddy, I'll come right over. He stayed at the hospital with him. Son John always felt so comfortable with Gary around. He called him Daddy. He's got 2 daddies, Brian, you and his daddy. He's got a daddy in heaven now. And so he came on over, and I didn't know this at all because I was so sound asleep in the bedroom. And so Gary was talking to him, and he got him all comfortable and covered up real good and got him warm. And he said, Gary, he said, Mother's so tired. He said, this has been the darkest days of our lives. And he said, she's so tired. And he said, I just wanted to come in here and let her get some rest. And so Gary was talking to him, and he said, Daddy, he said, does it ever make you wonder where Jesus is when we're suffering? And he spoke up, his little voice had gotten kind of weak, and he spoke up and he said, His mercy endures forever. Just as loud as he could, His mercy endures forever. And then in about 10 seconds, his heart stopped beating. So those were the last words he said. Thank you for staying with me. His mercy endures forever. And it does. It always will endure forever and ever and ever. Dr. Bassanio, you and Aldine aren't used to this screaming. I scream a lot. John used to say, darling, don't scream so loud. When I'd pray for sick people, I'd say, devil, leave. And he said, the devil hears you whether you scream or not. I said, well, it just sounds like he hears me better if I scream. Praise the Lord. I never did find Tom Osteen. Tom, I wanted to say something about, where is Tom? Tom, stand up, please, sweetheart. I'm so glad to see you. John loved your daddy. His daddy, his father, was Jack Osteen. And you've heard lots of stories. Remember the haunted house? You remember that one? The haunted house? Tom, have you heard any of those stories that John tells about your daddy? Yeah. Listen, you know, John said I was a gambler. Remember, he was a popcorn salesman in the Isis Theater, and he was a gambler. And I said, John, were you really a gambler? And he said, well, I lost Jack's $1 in a slot machine one time. Lost your daddy's $1. And he talked about how your daddy forgave. Said Jack was so merciful to me. Said, that's all right, little brother. So he has so many memories. I want to just tell you about some more people that John loved so much. Sam Martin, I hadn't spotted him. Everybody's changed. They usually have regular places. Sam Martin, would you stand up? This is the man that was John's high school friend that told him about Jesus and helped him to accept Jesus when he was 17. They're standing up for you, Sam. Yes. And Paula, his wife. Be seated. I don't know if John would have ever gotten saved if it hadn't been for Sam being so persistent. Started preaching on the streets and Salvation Army, any place he could find when he was 17. He tells a story he didn't know an epistle from an apostle. He thought an epistle was an apostle's wife. He didn't. He called Job, but that's all right. He grew. He might have been simple. It's simple in minded and simple in faith, but he was profound. He was a great man. Somebody else that he loved so much was Dr. Reginald B. Cherry. Reginald, Dr. Cherry, are you here? There he is. And Linda, would you stand up, please? Dr. Price, Todd Price, will you stand up, please? Dr. Todd Price and Sue. Sue, would you stand up? They've been wonderful. They've been wonderful. And they worked with John, trying to help him to find the pathway to his healing. And thank y'all for all the times he called you, for waking you up at night and all. Thank you. I'll always remember that in my heart. Somebody else that was so special to him was Johnny McGowan. Johnny, where are you? I saw him running around. Johnny would come by the house and pick up John and take him to dialysis. For a while he could drive himself, but he would come by and pick him up when he couldn't drive himself, and he'd stay there with him, and he'd go get him Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever he wanted to eat. Too bad, Dr. Cherry. You know, he was on a low sodium diet and it was so tasteless, so anything like that tasted good to him. But Johnny was always there for him. And the day that we took him to the hospital for the last time before his death, Johnny was there, brought him in. I went out to the garage because I heard him coming in, and John was leaning against the garage of the car, and he said, I'm hurting so much. And Johnny came in with me. And we sat on the couch, and I rubbed his back, and he said, Johnny, you rub me now for a while. So Johnny rubbed him and stayed there with him. And I hugged Johnny. I said, Johnny, thank you. Thank you for helping me. He said, Jesus told me to. He said, how many people would have the opportunity to sit and eat lunch with John Osteen 3 times a week? Come here, Johnny. Come here. Thank you. I'll always have that in my heart. Another man that's always been there when we needed him. From years back, years and years back, since John had his first bypass surgery, 1986, he could have died then. He put it off, and he could have died. It was an emergency. Before we went to the hospital that morning for Kath, I heard him in the den praying, and he had the globe, and he was saying, "Oh God, let me reach the world. Don't let me die. Let me reach the world." 1986, I heard him in there praying. And he had talked to the children because he felt death on him then. He said, "If anything happens to me, then I want you to take care of Mother." And this was 13 years ago, so God gave him some more time. But Jesse Gallardo was always there for us. Jesse, will you stand up? Jesse sells pacemakers, and he was always there with his daddy. He called him Daddy. Jesse didn't ever really meet his daddy. He called him Daddy. He's been here with us for how many years? 25? Something like that. And anytime John had any kind of procedure, he had a pacemaker, he had 2 or 3 or 4 caths, Jesse was always there. One morning, John was really, really sick. His heart was fibrillating back in I think it was 86 when he had that. And it was 4:30 in the morning, Saturday, and I was distraught. I was up there by myself, and I thought, God, if somebody would just come and be with me, it would help me so much. And I heard the elevator go, ding, 4:30 in the morning. And Jesse Gallardo stepped off of the elevator and came to be with me. That's true, friend. That's true love. Thank you, Jesse. And then Timothy Sullivan. Where are you, Timothy? Come here, Tim. Jesse, you come here and let me get a hug too. Timothy's always been there for us. He'd do anything in the world his daddy wanted him to do. His dad's gone too, but a lot of them call him Daddy. He helped us so much. He just has always been there for John. And I'm telling you, I could never repay them. And just the other day, he brought Oral and Evelyn Roberts came into the city, and Tim went and picked him up and brought him to our home to pray for John. And people like this you'll never forget. Thank you, Tim. I know there are thousands of people I could recognize. I just have to get a few, but it's all in my heart, the things you've done through the years. Is there anybody here from Gulf Coast Dialysis Center? Martha. Oh, Martha. Martha Whitworth, who's head of the Gulf Coast Dialysis Center. They were so good to John. And they had everybody scheduled, but they would let John come in anytime he wanted to come in. Take him anytime. All he had to do was say, "Get the machine ready. I'm coming in 15 minutes." And they were so wonderful. Martha will never forget that. Thank you. He's better off with Jesus, don't you think? Yes, she saw him. She saw him. Thank you, Martha. And please express my appreciation to everybody there. Anybody here from St. Luke's? Any of the nurses or doctors or anybody? I know they're all busy. They couldn't come. Who's here? Rosa. Ali, are you here? Nurse, there they are. Nurse in CCU, the wonderful people. Thank you. Thank the nurses. They were wonderful. The cardiologist, the renal team, the nurses, everybody. They were wonderful to us. And I thank them. I thank anybody that had a part in him. And there was a little Indian doctor there, nephrologist, and John prayed for him, and he was so appreciative. John witnessed to everybody. We prayed for the nurses as we left. That's the way he was. My children from Little Rock and from Victoria, and I don't know whether any of the other ones, friends are here or not, but they have friends that have come in from Little Rock and Victoria, some of the staff and all from Victoria. Would you please stand? And I want to thank you for coming. It's such a great thing. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. How much that means to us that you would come all this way. Thank you, my Father. He was a loved man. He loved me. Oh, he loved me. He thought I could do no wrong, but boy, was he ever wrong. He was always watching out for me, and don't do this, don't do that. I used to say, John, look, I'm 55 years old. Let me think myself. He was so protective. He was protective of our children. They may have not liked that too much, but when the girls would go off on an airplane, he'd say, call me the minute you get there. And whenever the plane was to arrive, the phone would ring, and they'd say, Daddy, we're here. Or when he knew they were coming into Houston, He would, at the time they were coming in, he'd call them on the cell phone, and it got to be a big joke. That's Daddy, when the phone rang in the car. But that's a daddy that loved his daughters. That's a daddy that loved his sons. He was not controlling. He would give them advice. They used to come to him for advice, not me. I mean, they didn't much appreciate my advice, but if they really had something that they needed prayer about, they'd go to their father. And I'm glad, because he was a wise man. But we have been blessed with the most wonderful children in the world. I could not have asked for better children. And we talked about it often, about how wonderful they were, how respectful they were. They loved us so much. They have taken care of us. They have helped bring food to my house. They have helped me take him to the emergency room. They have helped us in the hospital. I salute my children. I am grateful to Jesus for them. It's been hard on the children, on some of them especially. April and Gary are expecting their 4th child in just 2 weeks. And the other day at CCU, I missed her, and I said, "Where's April?" And they said, "She went home for a minute." Gary took her home for a minute. And I said, "Well, why?" And they said, "She went to get an ultrasound of her baby to put on Daddy's bed. She wanted her daddy to see his little grandbaby in utero." Well, he'll know in heaven when that little baby's born, and he'll rejoice. We got this the other day in the fax. "Dear Daddy," from our son Paul, who's a surgeon from Little Rock, and his beautiful wife Jennifer. This morning they have 3 little girls, and this is Matthew. Come here, darling. It's my oldest grandson. So sweet. He loves his grandmother. Come here, Michael. Come here, Andrea. We'll have number 16 in 2 weeks. He said, "This morning, Georgia and Olivia and I drank watered down coffee." Now, these are little kids that big. I'm glad it was watered down. They might have been pretty hyper all day from the caffeine. Watered down coffee, slurping in long drinks followed by an ah. Does that bring back memories? Their daddy used to drink coffee in the morning. He'd go, ah, and the kids all remember that. I hope I can pass along a lot more of what you passed on to me. I love you. I pray for you always. And I am constantly amazed about the profound impact that you have had in my life. We have so many memories in our hearts. In CCU the other day, we called them right after the heart attack, cardiac arrest, and Paul scheduled a plane, got here at 12:30 from Little Rock. Tamara and Jim left from Victoria, the middle daughter, left at about 4 or 5 in the morning, got here about 7:30, and I heard these steps running down the corridor of the hospital across CCU, and I thought, what's going on? And Jim said from the time she got out of her car in the parking lot, she ran. She didn't stop. She wanted to see her daddy, and she got to see him. They all have done so many wonderful things. Justin's been so good to us and to his father, and Lisa and Kevin. Victoria did, Joel's wife, did his makeup and did his hair for television. And our in-laws are not like in-laws, they're like our very own. I found this in the closet at our house. And you say, well, what is that? It's just a bunch of writing. Can y'all see that on TV? It's just a bunch of writing. Joel, who's been doing our TV since he was 19 years old, and who's tremendous, don't you think? He now is co-owner of the Tube, Channel 55. He's got us on there morning and night on Sundays. We'll never be taken off because our son owns the station. These are lists of things. He would come over every Saturday and pick out a suit and a tie and a shirt for his father to wear on television the next morning. It starts back in 1994, and up here it says Bulgaria, so he went to Bulgaria in 1994. And there it says a dark blue with a white shirt, and all these are suits that John wore for television. The television programs that you've seen, Joel came by and picked it out and had lists of them, and he kept this list in our closet. And then it says, the last one on first, what is today? 27th, 1999, dark navy with a gold strand Rico tie. That's the suit that John has on in the casket. Thank God for a son like that. Okay, I know y'all think I'm taking a long time, but after all, I want you to know that we are committed to carry on the work that my husband started. This family right here, the ones of us that live here, we are committed. We will not let this work go down. It was not founded on John Osteen. It's founded on the solid rock, Jesus Christ. Yes! You may be seated. And Ralphina so beautifully stood up the other night after our church was packed Sunday morning, and we just carried on like, John was here, and Sam Carr preached a most eloquent message, and it was tremendous. It was a masterpiece. But I want you to know we're going on. We got preachers in the family. We got a new preacher that we didn't know we had a preacher. Joel preached his first sermon. He preached his first sermon the Sunday before his father went home to be with the Lord. No, the Sunday before, wasn't it? Is that what it was? Sunday before. It was tremendous. John said, I'm going to ask Joel to preach. And I said, oh, that's so funny. Joel will never preach. And so when he called Joel said, Dad, that put me under pressure. I better not do it. And I said, see there, I told you. And then, you know what? He called back and he said, Daddy, you said I was first choice. He said, I think I want to preach Sunday. Did anybody hear him? Was he tremendous? I was so shocked. I thought he would preach 10 minutes and just walk down there. He preached 35 minutes, and how many got saved? 58 people or something like that got saved. So we got a new preacher in the family. And guess who asked me if they could preach again Sunday? Would you think it'd be Joel Osteen? He's going to preach Sunday morning. Big, tall, handsome, you may be seated, son-in-law from Victoria, Texas. They have a wonderful church there. He's going to preach tonight. Hallelujah. Jim Graff. Thank you, my Father. Well, I just wanted to tell you that the work will go on, and Jesus is going to help us. I am not John Osteen, but I still have the same Holy Ghost he has. And we're going to pray and ask God for wisdom, and we're going to go on reaching the city and the world. And we're going to do it with God's help. And if we're committed to you, are you committed to us? Yes. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so proud. How many of you are from Lakewood? I know you wanted to come for your pastor. Would you stand up? Thank you. Thank you for coming. You know, he's bound to hear that in heaven. That was pretty loud. I wanted to give my children opportunity. Lisa's such a tremendous preacher. April's a tremendous preacher. Cameron's a tremendous preacher. Jim, Gary. I guess that's about all. We hadn't gotten Kevin up here yet, but we may someday. Kevin. Anyway, we've got able ministers in the family, and who knows, one of these nights or days, I just may get me a sermon. I wanted to ask any of the children if they wanted to say anything. Give the girls a chance. I know. Oh, I guess I didn't give them a chance. I didn't give them a chance. They just took it.
I was instructed to go first. I do what I'm told. I hate following my mom, man. One minute I'm up there laughing, the next minute I'm crying. And what's to say after she's been up here? But I wanted to say, you know, my dad was a special person. Have so many treasured memories of him. I've had the opportunity to work with him the last 17 years here, and I know him inside and out. And what a man he was. He was my special friend, you know. We were 42 years difference in age, but still, he was the one I liked to hang around with. And so it was really special, and I was thinking about all the different things about Daddy. He was such a giver. You know, Daddy loved to give. He's always looking for ways to give. Compassionate man, and I'll never forget we traveled overseas, and Daddy was a people person. He liked to talk to people and go see them and encourage them, no matter who you are. You know, some people might have called him nosy, but he just liked to go out and see people and talk to them. And we were going overseas one time. We were refueling at this one little airport, and I noticed this guy about my age had a sleeping mat over there and a backpack, and he had been there for a while. And, you know, it wasn't long before my dad was over there, and I saw him giving him some money. You know, and that was the heart of my dad. He'd reached out to me. I asked him later, I said, Daddy, what was the story with that young man? He said, well, you know, he was one stop away from home, and he'd run out of money. And he said, so many people had helped me growing up. And he said, I sure hope somebody would help my children. He said, and that's why I wanted to reach out to him. But those kind of things happen all the time with Daddy. He loved to reach out to people. And what impressed me about my dad is he lived what he preached. He was real. You know, he was like that at home. He was simple, down to earth, funny, liked to have a good time. We liked to joke and have fun. You know, it wasn't always a super spiritual upbringing. We just liked to have fun, and he was real, and I think that's what drew us so close to him. But I was thinking, my mom already said everything I was going to say about when he asked me to preach, but I was thinking about when he called me and asked me to preach. He said, Joel, are you sitting down, and are you sure you really want to do it? And I said, yeah, I'd do it. But I wanted to say this first. He always encouraged us to chase our own dreams. I knew from a little boy he wanted me to preach, but I always told him, Daddy, you're the preacher. Who can preach any better than you? You preach, I'll do the television, I'll make you look good. You know, and he always was so proud of that. When he introduced me when we were out at functions, he said, this is my son Joel. He does my television program. And he'd smile real big and say, he makes me look good. He was so proud of that, but I never felt like he was up here and we were fine, but when he called me, I felt like I should do it, and never in my wildest dreams did I believe that I would speak for him the last Sunday that he was alive. And so I felt so honored, and I remember after I hooked him up so he could listen to me on the telephone, and, you know, my dad, he was going to be proud of me, I'm convinced, if I'd spoken Spanish. He just wanted me to get up here. But I went up to the St. Luke's after we were done, and I came down the hall, and the nurses all met me, and they said, man, Joel, we've never seen such a glow on your dad. He said, you know, he was... He was just so proud, you know. Of course, I made him proud, and he was beaming. But you know, I'd do anything in the world for him, and all our family would. And my mom, I didn't know she was going to bring this, but there's a little story behind that. You know, I was up in the television control room, and I'd never see him until he showed up for church on Sundays, and it got to be where we'd look out there through the monitors and say, "Our monitors are adjusted right. What's he got on?" I didn't ever tell him, and I said, "Daddy, you know, I'll be there Sunday. I'll pick out what you need to wear." I don't think those cameras can handle some of those colors. But Daddy was a real giving person, and the little things he'd do, I'm not going to take too long, but he loved my wife, Victoria. He lived for the simple things. He used to drive up to church and say, "Joe, I can't believe there's 8,000 people there. Can you believe it?" He lived for the simple things, very simple man. But one time, Victoria's birthday came about, and my mom bought her a beautiful vase, and it was from my mom and dad. But, you know, that was enough for Daddy. He liked to do special things. And we were over at his house one night, and he said, "Victoria, come back here and look at my new shoes." And she went back there and she said, boy, those are beautiful. She called him Big O. She said, those are beautiful, Big O. And he said, well, look at them really close. And so she picked him up and looked at him, and he said, well, feel inside of them. He wasn't satisfied yet. And feel inside of them. See how soft they are. And he reached down there, and of course my dad had written a special note and put a $100 bill in there. But that's the way my dad was. You know, in the last few months when he wasn't feeling well, he still kept his joy. And we still I just still remember him with a spring in his step and a smile on his face. And, I'd go pick up prescriptions for him at Walgreens, and my dad was always a giver. And I'd take him there, and it'd be $20, and he'd give me $40. And I said, Daddy's only $20. No, I want you to have that. And I'd go up to Dallas a lot of times with Johnny, and we'd get him a hamburger from Fuddruckers, and we'd go up there and eat it. And it'd be a $5 burger, and he'd give me $10 or $15. And I told him just last week, I said, Daddy, I'm making money off of you. But that was Daddy's heart. He loved to give, and like my mom said, that we're going to continue on, and his dream was for the family to continue on his work, and we're going to carry out his legacy of compassion and sharing God's love and mercy with this city and with the world. And we're just committed to that, and we just honor my dad, and we're honored that you have all come to